Hello, everybody, and welcome to this course, Making Ethical Decisions. But where's Madonna Murphy? She's supposed to be teaching this class. Well, let me tell you about an ethical dilemma I had. As soon as we set up the classes for the fall term and I saw the beginning date, I realized that I had already made a commitment in March to be presenting at a conference up in Wisconsin, and there was no way I could also be in two places at one time. So I asked Nancy North and Mike Yeager on the curriculum committee if they thought it was better for me to wait till the winter term to start this ethical decision-making class. And they said no, as long as I had all the materials ready that I was going to show, they thought it'd be okay to go with the class as planned. And so thanks to Pat Schultz, who's being the facilitator for the facilitator, here we are. And I'm going to show you now on video all of the different things that I would show you the first day of class. First of all, I'd like anybody who's new to please just raise your hand. And if you're sitting next to someone who's new, please introduce yourself and welcome them to the Renaissance Academy. I think it's so important that we welcome the new people and make them feel at home. There's a lot of things, that once you've been doing them, but other people may not know it. And it may be their first time back to class in 30 years if they're recently retired or just semi-retired, as we say. Okay, so just a little bit about myself. I'm a retired professor from the University of St. Francis, and was lucky I got to become Professor Emerita, which means I get to keep my email, but then also I have access to all the computer programs of the university as part of that, benefit, and Zoom too. So here we are. I taught in the College of Education for almost 30 years there, teaching both undergraduates who want to become teachers and also teachers in the field who are getting a graduate degree or extra credits. I became, as you're going to see in the video clip we'll show in a minute, very interested in ethics and character education and philosophy in college. And I kept that as a professor, trying to teach the students how they can teach values and virtues, even in the public school, because it's part of what it is to be a human being. So I hope that you enjoyed this class, ethics. If some of you are in a profession such as nursing or business, you may have taken a business ethics class or a nursing ethics class. It wasn't until recently that we actually added educational ethics. But as you're going to see in the first TED Talk, we are all asked to make ethical decisions all the time, whether we've had a class or not. And so having a class can help us to make our principles clearer and help us to make more thoughtful decisions. So my goal from this class is hopefully at the end of this class, you'd be able to explain what ethics is as you understand it. We're going to be giving several different definitions, so you can pick the one that you feel is going to be more helpful for you. And then at the end, we're going to use a few dilemmas, have a few little dilemmas, and discuss how you think that they should be decided. And you'll also be able to use your own ethical framework that you've developed, whether you think this is a just thing to do or the fair thing to do or whatever, have you make your decision. And so hopefully you'll find the first class interesting and you'll come back for the second class. So I hope you enjoyed this class, and thank you to Pat Schultz for being the facilitator. Here we go.
Welcome to this course, Making Ethical Decisions. I was first introduced to philosophy at the University of Chicago. As an undergraduate, I saw people doing things that I had been taught you are not supposed to do, and I felt that maybe it was because we of our different religions. That's until I took a philosophy class and discovered Aristotle. And then I realized that no, there are some basic truths about how to live and what the natural law is that all people should follow, no matter what their faith, culture, or ethnic background. And so Aristotle gave me a moral compass, so to speak, to navigate through my undergraduate years and then also to go on afterwards and get my master's and doctorate. So what is philosophy? Well, let's take the word apart. Philosophers like to do that. So philo is love of, and Sophia is love of wisdom. Well, yeah, but then what is wisdom? And we realize our grandmothers probably are very wise. And why? Because they understand things. Through experience, they understand with depth. And they know the causes of things, how they came to be. And then, of course, we could ask, well, now what exactly is a cause? And we realize that that's which makes a thing be what it is. And so we come to the million-dollar question, so to speak. So what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning to be a human person? What is it to live a good life, a good moral life? And philosophy can give us the answers to those perennial questions. So we can summarize that philosophy is a way of thinking about the world, the universe, and society. It works by asking very basic questions about the nature of human thought, the nature of the universe, and the connection between them. Now, in philosophy, there are several different branches, and you study them when you get an undergraduate degree in the discipline. However, in this class, we're going to look at just one component of philosophy, the study of ethics. In other words, what is of value? What is the right way to make decisions based on values and virtues and moral principles?
I have been a television comedy writer for almost 25 years. I have written sketches and animated shows and sitcoms, but for the last decade, my real passion has been the study of ethics. It's a classic cautionary tale, right? You move to Hollywood, you get seduced by the bright lights and the fast cars, and before you know it, you're reading 18th century German philosophy. I've always been an intense rule follower. When I was in kindergarten, our teacher would tell everyone to line up, and I would immediately line up, and then I would look at all the other kids who were still goofing off, and I would think, what are they doing? Did they not hear her? She said to line up. I rinse my mouth with mouthwash for at least 30 seconds every night because on the label, it says, use for 30 seconds. I know, I'm irritated by me too. But the real reason that I became interested in ethics is because in 2005, I royally and epically screwed something up. So, 2005, my wife, JJ, driving along in slow-moving traffic, bumps into the guy in front of her. Police officer looks everything over, doesn't see any damage, they exchange numbers, and they go on their way. A couple days later, we get a notice that the guy wants $836 because, according to him, the entire fender needs to be replaced. This is happening during Hurricane Katrina. JJ and I had just been to New Orleans on a trip. We had really fallen in love with this beautiful city, which was now literally underwater. I was very riled up. This was hitting me really hard. So I went and I looked at the guy's car, and if I got very close and I strained my eyes, I could just barely see this little line on the crease. It looked like the mark you make with a pencil on the wall when you're trying to hang a picture. And I told the guy, essentially, that he shouldn't care about this. I told him that things like this were why car insurance rates in LA were so expensive. I told him that cars get little dings and dents all the time, and he was stupid to care about that. I told him that there were more important things in life than this, like Hurricane Katrina. And then I made him an offer. I said that I would donate $836 to the Red Cross Katrina Relief Fund in his name if he agreed not to file this claim and fix his car. He said he would think it over. So I went back to work, and as very confident people are wont to do, I started telling all my friends about how awesome I was being. And then they jumped in and started pledging more and more money if this guy would agree not to fix his car. So suddenly it was $2,000, then it was $5,000. In like a day and a half, I had pledges from hundreds of people all across the country of more than $25,000 if this guy would agree not to file an insurance claim and fix his car. And by the way, he has no idea this is happening. He is completely in the dark. I started a blog where I gave people hourly updates. Yeah, it's beginning to dawn on you what a bad idea this is, right? I started a blog, gave people updates. I got media inquiries from news programs, from NPR. I had a dream of rescuing New Orleans by myself with nothing more than my computer and a fire hose of self-righteous anger. And then I started to feel sick to my stomach. And so did JJ at the exact same moment. We both were suddenly overcome with this awful feeling that there was something very bad and wrong about what we were doing, but we could not pinpoint what it was. I just remember thinking, all right, I don't care about cars getting little dings and dents, but this guy does. Is that wrong somehow? I don't think that's wrong. And also, is this little tiny negotiation that we're in really worth all of this fury and rage and shame that I'm whipping up and sending in his direction? I don't think it is. So I did what any rational person would do in this situation. I started crying and I hid under my bed. And then I started reading philosophy. And I started calling philosophy professors and asking them to talk this out with me. And in the process, yeah, and they all, by the way, did it, because philosophy professors love talking about philosophy. The drop of a hat, they will all talk about philosophy with you. So in the process, I learned all of these incredibly wonderful theories that the smartest people who have ever lived have developed over the last 2,500 years that help us make better decisions and become better people. For example, I learned about Immanuel Kant and the categorical imperative. So Kant says when we're about to do something, we have to design a rule or a maxim that we could will to be universal, meaning we have to imagine what if everyone did what we're about to do, what would happen to the world? Would it be okay or would it get all screwed up? So the maxim I'm designing here is something like anytime two people are in any kind of negotiation, one of them can drag into the negotiation an entirely unrelated global calamity and tell the other person that they shouldn't care about whatever they care about because they should care about that instead. That world would suck, right? Like, your sister borrows $5 from you, you ask for it back, she says, how dare you care about $5 when the polar ice caps are melting? No one wants to live in this world, right? Kant also says, by the way, that you should treat people as ends in themselves and not a means to an end, meaning you shouldn't use people to get what you want. Well, guess what I was doing? I also learned about Aristotle and the study of virtue ethics. So Aristotle says there's certain qualities we should all have, things like generosity and courage and friendliness and mildness, and he wants us to practice them every day so that we not only have them, we have them in the exact right amount. We don't have a deficiency of them, and we don't have an excess of them. Now, virtue ethics can be kind of maddeningly imprecise, but at the very least, it was pretty clear that I was exhibiting an excess of anger and maybe a deficiency of friendliness. I wasn't nailing it, is the point. Like, I definitely was not getting it exactly right. Then I learned about utilitarianism, made famous by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. And this one actually gave me a shred of hope that I was doing something good, because utilitarians only care about the results of our actions. They only care that we are creating more happiness and pleasure than we are pain and suffering. So yes, I'm being obnoxious and moralistic and high-handed to this guy, causing him some amount of pain, but an enormous amount of money is going to be given to people in great need. So the amount of happiness I'm creating outweighs the amount of pain and suffering. But the utilitarians also said that when we're calculating the amount of happiness or pain we've created, we can't just think about the one person we're dealing with. We have to think about the fact that everybody in our society will now both know this happened and will fear that it could someday happen to them. And since we've already seen what a terrible, stinky world I was trying to create, everyone in our society would become a little bit bummed out and sad by what I did. And so the total amount of pain and suffering I've created might actually outweigh the happiness. I never got a straightforward answer, obviously, because Aristotle never wrote about like fender benders involving horse-drawn carriages in ancient Athens. But at the very least, it sure felt like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill would be a little disappointed in me. And it sure felt like Aristotle would be a little annoyed. And it sure felt like Immanuel Kant would wave a disapproving finger at me. And if all of the world's greatest philosophers are on one side of a debate, and you are on the other side, you fucked up. Okay. So, I called the guy. I apologized profusely. I told him the entire story. He was very kind and forgiving, which was an enormous relief to me. I told him I had already cut him a check, which was in the mail. I went back to the blog. I told everybody the outcome. Most people, not all, but most of them thought it was a pretty happy outcome. I encouraged them to give money to the Red Cross anyway, because giving money to hurricane victims is a nice thing to do. And in the end, more than $25,000 was indeed donated to the Red Cross Hurricane Katrina relief efforts. Don't applaud that. That's the happy result of a bad event. So why did this embarrassing, miserable mistake that I made make me want to continue to study moral philosophy? If I told you that you were going to be on Jeopardy, how would you prepare? You would read some trivia books and flip through a world atlas. If I told you that you were going to take a half-court shot at an NBA game for the chance to win $50,000, how would you prepare? You would get a basketball, you would go to the YMCA, and you would practice hucking up half-court shots. Well, you're probably never going to be on Jeopardy. You are probably never going to take a half-court shot at an NBA game for a chance to win $50,000, but you will, I guarantee it, at some point become embroiled in a complicated, confusing, ugly, gut-wrenching moral dilemma. That is just a fact of life on Earth. There will be a dilemma in which there is no clear rule to follow. There is only a kind of vague investigation, and everything you do seems like it might be wrong. So how do you prepare for that? By reading theories of ethics and understanding what they say, what they mean, how they purport to help us make better decisions and become better people. And by the way, just reading these theories is no guarantee that you will actually make the right choice when you're inside one of these complicated and tangled ethical dilemmas. You can take all the practice half-court shots you want at the YMCA, but when you set foot on the floor of the NBA arena and there are 15,000 screaming fans, you're probably still going to throw up an air ball, right? But if you've prepared, you will increase your odds of success. You will increase the chances that you sink the shot or that you at least get the ball close enough to the rim that you don't embarrass yourself and become a meme. Understanding ethical theories is how we increase our chances of success at simply being human beings who have to negotiate with other human beings. And to me, there is nothing more important than that. Thank you.
So let's summarize the definition of this study, looking at the word. Ethics comes from the Greek, which I don't know, but we can break this down in ethika, which means character, and ethos, which means guiding beliefs. So a definition we could work with is that ethics is the branch of philosophy that deals with how a person of character ought to live based on concepts of what is just or fair or right or wrong in human conduct, and thus make their ethical decisions based on this. Okay, here's a little video clip that'll perhaps explain what ethics is a little bit more clearly.
Ethics. The term ethics often describes the investigation and analysis of moral principles and dilemmas. Traditionally, philosophers and religious scholars have studied ethics. More recently, scholars from various disciplines have entered the field, creating new approaches to the study of ethics, such as behavioral ethics and applied ethics. The term ethics can also refer to rules or guidelines that establish what conduct is right and wrong for individuals and for groups. For example, codes of conduct express relevant ethical standards for many professions, such as medicine, law, journalism, and accounting. Some philosophers make a distinction between ethics and morals. But many people use the terms ethics and morals interchangeably when talking about personal beliefs, actions, or principles. For example, it's common to say, My ethics prevent me from cheating. It's also common to use morals in this sentence instead. So, whether we use the term ethics to refer to our personal beliefs or rules of conduct, or the study of moral philosophy, ethics provides a framework for understanding and interpreting right and wrong in society.
And so we see there are many definitions as to what ethics encompasses. You could call it your guiding philosophy. It could be your set of moral principles, values, and virtues which will guide your action. It implies decisions, choices, and actions we make that reflect and enact our values. And in summary, we could say it's a study of the principles of good conduct and right behavior and how people make those judgments. And so as we go along, we'll give our definition that we're going to use in this course. We know it's a branch of philosophy. We know it deals with what is just, fair, and equitable behavior to be expected in a particular case and how an honorable person of character should behave. So we're going to see it's a practical discipline, but there's two parts of it. First of all, the theoretical part, which you could say is science. And we'll talk about different ethicists who you might have heard some of their names, Plato and Aristotle and Kant. They kind of give us a science or a method to use in making moral decisions. And then we will try to use these theories and apply them to given cases. That's where we're going to see that ethics is also an art, because you have to make the decision of what's the best thing to do in a particular situation, and sometimes it's not always clear. So we could summarize with this little saying from the Character Counts organization, and remember I use some of theirs because I'm a character counts trainer. What is right, even if no one else is doing it. What is wrong, even if everyone is doing it. So that's the hope of this course. We could think about how we can promote in our society the living of better virtues such as honesty and respect and fairness as we deal with one another. Change the moral environment of our society. Another catchy phrase that we could use that helps us here is ethics is not about the way things are. It's about the way things ought to be. Each of us making good ethical decisions can change how our society is.
How many decisions do you think you make each day? If you ask the internet, the answer will range from 70 to 35,000. If you ask us, it's the wrong question to be asking at all. That's because we're interested in ethics. We're not concerned about the quantity of your decisions. We care about their quality. You might want to think of ethics as a tool that helps us create the difference between a good decision and a bad one. Ethics is the branch of philosophy that asks the practical question, what should we do? This leads to the study of things like values, principles, beliefs, and norms. These are the things that shape our choices. Ethics asks us, how should we live? What choices should we make? And what makes our lives worth living? It tries to help us define the conditions of a good choice and then figure out which of our available options is the best one. Let's say a close friend, Lee, confides in you that they're struggling with depression. They're feeling isolated and alone, but whenever they're invited to go out, they find it impossible to do. Lee insists they don't want anyone else to know. They're trusting this information to you alone. A few days later, another friend comes to you, frustrated about Lee. Lee's flaked on plans at the last minute yet again, and your friend has had enough. They've decided they just won't bother inviting Lee out anymore. So you're torn. If Lee stops being invited to things, the isolation could make them feel even worse. Sharing information about their depression might help Lee be treated with more empathy and compassion. But it would be a breach of trust. And if Lee found out, Especially in a vulnerable state, who knows what might happen? What do you do? Keep the secret and allow Lee to be socially isolated? Or break Lee's trust, but do it for their benefit? Answering this question means getting clear on what matters, our values and principles. Our values are the things we hold to be good and therefore care about most deeply. Things like justice, knowledge, family and equality. In this case, we're likely to value both trustworthiness and compassion, which pull us in different directions. So it looks like an appeal to values alone won't let us solve this dilemma. We don't just need to know what's good, we need to know what's right. This is where principles come in. They help us draw a line in the sand. They determine the acceptable ways of getting the things that we value. So what's our guiding principle with regard to Lee? Some people might adopt a principle like be true to your word, meaning you keep Lee's confidence no matter the risks. Others might be inclined towards a principle like act in people's best interests and decide that it's in Lee's best interest that people know about the depression. Of course, there are still ambiguities, which is part of what makes ethical decision-making so complicated. So how do we select which values and principles to adopt? And how do we make choices when we face a conflict of values and principles? Good versus good, right versus right. What helps to orient our judgment is a connection to purpose. What's our guiding North Star? What's our reason for being? Think about Lee again. Now, think about the purpose of friendship. What are friends for? Think about why Lee decided to tell you in confidence. Your purpose as Lee's friend is to share their life with them, the highs and the lows. But it's their life and it's their decision on who they share it with. Lee chose to share this information with you alone. Given this, even if you prefer to act in people's best interests, thinking about purpose and thinking about Lee's purpose might encourage you to take a different path. Every time we make a choice, we change the world. What kind of world do you want to live in? Whether you make 35,000 choices a day or just one, what's important is that you make choices that are good and right. Choices you can justify, ones you can be proud of. That's what makes the choices actively yours.
So now we've got the background of what ethics is. Let's move into ethical decision making. So we see that there's going to be two elements involved in ethical decision making, or ethical behavior, if you want to call it that, is first of all, we have to recognize that an ethical dilemma or challenge when it occurs. They say that there's a lot of moral illiteracy in our society today, and you might say, what does that mean? Well, people are illiterate. They don't even know that what they're trying to do now is make an ethical decision. They don't realize that this is an instance where I need to live integrity or honesty or kindness, and they just do whatever they feel like doing, so to speak. Okay, so first, once you recognize I got an ethical dilemma, now you have to study it and discern what would be the right action to do in this given situation, these given circumstances, using my ethical principles. You know, it's important to realize that not everything is a matter of ethics, and all the decisions we make are not always ethical decisions. So you look and say, well, there's three kinds of acts. Okay, those you ought to do, those you ought not to do. Now, these two are of the area of ethics. Okay, but there's also things that you may either do this or not do that. And so that's personal preference, personal values, not ethical values. So now, what is morality, and is it the same as ethics or different? Okay, so we have these two words, moral. When we say moral, we say that something is conforming to an established code or accepted behavior considered to be good. In other words, there's an ethics, and now this is moral, and it's standing up to that ethics, that moral conduct, which is following from that ethical decision. Okay, morality is the conduct that follows from one's ethical base. It's the practice of ethical behavior in conformity with an established norm of what is considered to be good. So first you have your ethics, then you have to make your ethical decisions, and we're going to see those ethical decisions in the morality of our society and the morals that each person stands up to. So now we want to think, well, what are moral values? Well, first of all, what are values? Well, values, we know, refers to all important beliefs that we have. However, ethics refers only to beliefs about moral right and wrong. And so when we talk about moral values, those are values that tell us what we ought and ought not to do. Now, there's two kinds. One are universal, and these are values that are true for everyone, no matter what country you're from, what nationality, what race, what religion. These are universal moral values. We see from Aristotle how one person ought to act towards another person from the beginning of time. You know, Cain killed Abel, and killing is wrong, you know. Now, then there's non-universal values that are perhaps value to a particular culture, and this is what we do here, but they are not necessarily universal that everybody acts in this particular way. So we can use this PowerPoint from the Character Council organization. I have their logo, so I'm citing my source, where they explain to us in a visual the different kinds of values. So first of all, there's personal values. You know, what you like about art and music, what color you like, your personal lifestyle, what you enjoy doing. And for each person, those can be different, and they don't necessarily have an ethical component to them. The ethical values are these different virtues which we want people to live, being honest and loyal and having respect and trustworthiness and responsible person, and be fair and just, caring and kind, and also be a good citizen. Now, these ethical values hopefully also are going to impact how we work and how we act towards other people, that we're punctual and diligent and prudent, making good decisions, honest and kind and generous. And so we see this is a big gamut of areas where we have to look about how we are living with other people. Another saying I think we'd all agree with it, there's a big difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do. And perhaps this is one of the challenges of our society now. People think they have a right to do whatever they want to do and say whatever they want to do and go wherever they want to do and post whatever they want to post. And yet we have to say, you know, is that the right thing to do? Is that the kind thing to do? Is that a helpful thing to do? Is that an ethical thing to do?
Enjoy this movie, then visit BrainPop.com for much more. Say what? Dear Robot Ethicist, Mr. Anderson pays me $6 an hour to mow his lawn. It usually takes me 2 hours, but last week I got it done 30 minutes faster. He already paid me in advance. Is it ethical for me to keep the money? From Amber. You're the paper's new ethics columnist? Okay, let's see your response. Dear Amber, ethical schmethical, just live in the moment. Best, Moby. Do you even know what ethics is? Alright, how should I begin? If you've ever watched a nature video, you may have noticed that animals behave a little selfishly. They act on their urges without much regard for other creatures. People are a little different. We care about how our actions will affect others. But we are part of the animal kingdom, so we still struggle with selfish urges. We want stuff for ourselves, whether it's food and money, or more complex things like love and popularity. Can you imagine what would happen if everyone acted on these desires? Yep, total breakdown in society. Fortunately, we've evolved a sense of morality, or right and wrong. This sense guides us to believe in certain values. Lying is wrong, kindness is good, that sort of thing. Values, in turn, help us make ethical decisions, choices that we feel good about. So you can think of ethics as a set of guidelines for behaving morally. Well, let's take this first letter of yours. If you take $12 for mowing the lawn in 90 minutes, your wage will be $8 an hour. That's deceptive, because you agreed to work for $6 an hour, and lying is morally wrong. Why? Well, our inner moral sense tells us it is. That's why so many ethical systems forbid it. Most religions and philosophies frown on dishonesty. And our legal codes prohibit certain kinds of lying, too. It's a crime to make false statements to the police or in a court of law. And if you're in business, it's illegal to make false claims to the public. It might help Amber to imagine herself in Mr. Anderson's place. No one likes being lied to. Mr. Anderson might not trust her to mow his lawn again if he finds out. Amber should admit that it only took 90 minutes to mow the lawn and offer to give $3 back. She might lose a couple bucks, but her reputation is more important than money. Anyway, that was an easy one. What else have you got? Dear Robot Ethicist, yesterday, I caught my friend Steve cheating off my test. He's never done it before, and he begged me to keep it secret. If his parents find out, he'll be grounded for weeks. What should I do? From Anthony. This one's a bit trickier. We know that cheating is wrong, and every school has rules against it. On the other hand, friendship carries its own ethical obligations. Friends should be loyal and try to help each other out. By telling your teacher, you'd be betraying Steve. Yep, it looks like we've got an ethical dilemma, a situation with no clear-cut right answer. It may seem silly, but making a list of arguments for each action can be super helpful. The school code prohibits cheating, and you can get in trouble if your teacher finds out. But your friend will fail the test and get grounded if you say something. Still, friendship cuts both ways. It wasn't fair for Steve to put you in this position. There are definitely more reasons to speak up than stay quiet. Unfortunately, there is no formula for acting ethically. You have to judge by the individual situation. Ask yourself, what solution is fairest to all the people involved? Maybe you and Steve could go to your teacher together and tell her about the situation. Steve could ask for a makeup test or promise to do extra credit to keep his grades up. That way, he won't get away with cheating, and you won't betray his trust. Nope, I was happy to help, but it wouldn't be ethical for me to answer all your letters. You're going to have to rely on your own moral compass for the rest of these. This explains so many things.
Visit us at brainpop.com for more on this topic and hundreds of others. You'll find movies, games, quizzes, and activities. Learn more about the difference BrainPop can make.
So finally, now we understand what ethics and morality is, let's get into the actual thing of what this course is, making ethical decisions. Again, and using the character counts slides to help us out, there's a couple of steps to making ethical and effective decisions when they're in the area of morals and ethics. We see this is important to have a couple of steps because we realize now that making ethical decisions is about choosing among options according to ethical principles. It's about doing what is right, and sometimes we can say it's about doing what is the best thing to do, given that there's a couple good things we could do. Or what's the least negative thing to do, given that there doesn't seem to be any positive thing to do in a given situation. So here's a clear 7 steps to good decision making from our Character Counts organization. Well, stop and think. Okay, is this a situation where I need to make an ethical decision? Okay. Be prudent. Okay. Clarify your goals. What do I want to do in this situation? What's my goal? Determine the facts. Be sure you have all of the facts. Don't judge somebody just on what somebody said. Get all the facts. Okay. And then even using a piece of paper, they say put a chart, develop options. What are a couple of things I could do in this situation? And then what might be the consequence if I do this thing? Kind of weighing the consequences too. Then what we want to do is decide according to some ethical principle that you realize, okay, I have decided that the most honest thing to do in this situation is, or I have decided the just thing to do in this situation is, or the kind and loving thing to do in this situation. And sometimes we might have two values in conflict. Well, the just thing would be this, but the kind thing would be this, and what should I do? Okay. So we make our decision, we know what ethical principle we made it on, and then we have to monitor it and see what happens and evaluate it. And even that learning from our ethical decisions, sometimes we say, I tried, but I think actually in the end that wasn't the best thing to do. We can learn from those for the next time. At least we tried our best to make an ethical decision.
Ethics, as a field of study, is sort of like a tree with 10,000 branches, branches that all disagree with each other. With such variances, then how do we begin to understand ethics? One way to really think about ethics is through its historical meaning, which has to do with a person's ethos. This is the idea that ethics is connected with character, and it's sort of a high standard approach to what it means to act in a particularly cogent way. And then there's a more important conceptual distinction a person could make, particularly between ethics and morals. This is needed because when defining ethics, many will use the word morals interchangeably. There is, however, some disagreement among scholars as to the difference between morals and ethics. One school of thought asserts that morality is inherently founded on spiritual principles, one's responsibility to a supernatural being or goal. Ethics, on the other hand, relies on materialist and social consequences, not spiritual ones, in order to determine what is ethical or not. Other schools of thought argue that this line between morals and ethics is arbitrary. Instead, they believe ethics is simply a formal branch of philosophy that concerns itself with the study of morals and their derivation. This group would assert that ethics is a philosophy of morals. We posit that ethics is not the same thing as morality. Consider, for example, how arbitrary moral stances tend to be, especially when they're outside of one's own culture or religious beliefs. What may seem justifiable in one culture can easily be problematic in another. In addition, being ethical is not simply following a law or rules that have been established. In fact, some of our most revered historical/modern figures not only disagreed with laws and rules they deemed to be unethical, but also fought against them. And in some cases, it cost them their lives. Ethics, rather, emphasizes the responsibility and capability of the individual to come to his or her own conclusions through reasoning, and to determine which principles are relevant in a particular case. They are well-founded standards of right and wrong that prescribe what humans ought to do, usually in terms of rights, obligations, fairness, or specific virtues. Ethics is the reasonable obligation for us to refrain from hurting others. Living ethically also requires the continuous effort of studying our own beliefs and conduct, and striving to ensure that we, and the institutions we help to shape, live up to standards that are reasonable and evidence-based. It is knowing that before we can do the right thing, one has to figure out what the right thing is.
So if you've enjoyed this first PowerPoint here, and you're going to stick with me, let me outline that I think this ethics course will take 2 terms of 6 weeks each. Okay. So what we'll do is we're going to look at some of the famous ethicists that you might have heard about, and probably this first 6 weeks we'll just get to the first 4. You probably heard of Plato and maybe Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas and David Hume. They each have their own kind of system to make their ethical decisions. Okay, and then we're going to see there's some other people too, though, a little bit more modern, Kant and Mill and Lawrence Kohlberg and Carol Gilligan and Nell Noddings. And so in the second term in the winter, we'll look at them. And then hopefully you'll have an array of different ethical decision-making theories, and you pick the one that you feel is going to help you the most as you go forth and make your ethical decisions. And so let's end with a quote from Teddy Roosevelt on the importance of ethics. He says, to educate a person in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace to society. And so that's why I really dedicated my professional career to teach ethics at the college level to future teachers, undergraduates, and teachers. And we can see if we just reflect that there's a lot of smart people out there. I mean, you have to be smart to make a computer virus, but why make a computer virus and ruin my computer? You don't even know me. Okay. Or we've seen lately with so many shootings, these are smart people who know how to make bombs or all sorts of things, and yet why do that and hurt people? And so ethics and character education is something we have to promote and hope, because this is the future of our society, that we could be kind and caring to everyone. So now let's use some of the principles and concepts and the steps of ethical decision making we've gone over to discuss the ethical dilemma I mentioned at Open House. I have it on this slide because this is a character count slide, and I want to give credit to the source for these dilemmas. I was a trained character counts trainer, and after the training, we're able to use all their materials. We're just supposed to cite the source of our materials. So we're acknowledging their intellectual content and also not breaking any copyright laws. Okay, so here we are. You are a member of the condo board for your building. There's a terrible storm and lightning hits 3 of the air conditioner units on the roof. There's 6 units, 3 of which had broken down before, but you never got fixed. Now all 6 are broken and the air conditioning does not work at all. You're going to apply to the insurance company for reimbursement to get them fixed. The other board members want to say that all 6 got hit and therefore need to be fixed. You don't think this is ethical, as the other 3 were already broken before. But if someone argues, we should say all 6 are broken, which is true, and get money to fix all of them. What do you say? What do you think you should do? And what would be your rationale for your ethical decision? Okay, discuss now with the person next to you, and we'll give you about 3 minutes to do so. Okay, now let's all come together. This is the hard part when you have group activity. Hopefully everybody can hear me and quiet down. And if I was there, I'd have people share their different answers and their rationale. But I think we'd probably all agree that we really should not apply for all 6 because we know only 3 got hit by the terrible storm and the lightning, and that's what the insurance is for. How are we going to explain this to somebody else, though, who perhaps is not taking an ethics course and really thinks that we should do this? Maybe we could explain, why don't we try to do some kind of fundraiser here at the condo to get some extra money for that. Or we could also say, it worked with only 3 before. Why don't we just get the 3 fixed and let it work that way? And then also to say, if everybody is dishonest with their insurance claims, that's why the insurance premiums are going to go up. So we have to kind of talk to people in different ways to get them around to agree with us. Okay, if you have time, let's do the next dilemma, but if you don't, we can do it next time. Dilemma 2 is also taken from the Character Counts materials. It states, your granddaughter is about to enter high school. The local high school in her area has a poor academic reputation and is known to have a problem with drug abuse. Your daughter and her husband cannot afford the local private school. They ask you if they can use your address as their daughter's residence, as the high school in your area is very good. Would you allow your granddaughter to use your address as her official residence if she does not plan to live with you? Again, discuss with your seatmates next to you, a couple of the people, what you think should be done and why. And I'll give you again 3 minutes if we have enough time before the end of the class here. Well, let's come together again. I know. You can keep on talking after the class is done. Well, again, we know that this is a very relevant situation. We've heard of this of other people. But we know that this is not the answer. And of course, if your granddaughter knew her grandparents were not telling the truth, that can have very detrimental effect on her moral growth and her own personal ethics. What are some things you can do? Well, first of all, you can invite your granddaughter, well, if you wish to actually live with you during the week. Maybe that'd be nice. Get to know her well and have her help you out a bit. Or if you can, maybe you can offer to help pay the tuition at the private school. Or you can encourage your daughter and her husband to get on the local high school board and try to change it around. Because as one of the quotes we'll see later in the course, the only thing for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And so when there's a problem, we have to try to solve the problem. And one of the problems is inequity in our schools. We have really, really good schools and we have really, really poor schools. But if we all get together, we could make all the schools, well, good. Okay, well, we've come to the end of the class that I prepared for you today. I just want to end with a little question. We said at the beginning, the goal of this first class was to introduce you to ethics. So you could have kind of a definition of ethics that you can understand and roll with. And so I guess I just end with this question. So after this class now, what do you understand ethics to be? And do you see how important it is that we have this class so we can discuss these issues together? Okay, well, thank you everyone for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the class, and I look very forward to seeing you in person next Tuesday. Take care.